My name's Andy Dennis, and I'm a nurse in the National Health Service in the UK, and I also work with Doctors Without Borders. For the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to be talking about this international medical organisation and tell you a little bit about my experiences with them and why I think they're such an important entity. So, MSF is an international organisation, as I said, they're working in around 70 countries globally. Employing around 30,000 national staff, so they truly are a global organisation. We work in a number of different contexts, and I would like to just talk about those different contexts now. So the first one I would talk about would be conflict, and the pictures that you see in this in this slide are were taken in South Sudan in a place called Sakure in 2008. The Lord's Resistance Army is a group of rebels fighting out of Uganda, northern Uganda specifically, since the mid-80s. And they've been causing chaos in this region of northern Uganda, southern Sudan, and up into the Central African Republic for a very long time. They attacked our clinic primarily to take medical supplies, which they took. They also killed 2 of our staff in this attack. What they also do, though, is they take other property and they take children. They take children from communities. This is probably the most cynical recruitment policy you could ever imagine. What they do is they force the children to commit atrocities within their communities, for example, to kill their parents or to kill their siblings or neighbours, and then they take them away into the bush and train them as fighters. The idea being that once they've committed such atrocities within the community, that they won't want to go back to their village and will stay with the LRA and indeed become child soldiers for them. The next context I would look at would be where exclusion from care has occurred. And exclusion comes in a couple of different ways. The first one that I'll look at will be overwhelming demand, where the ability for a country's health system to cope with the numbers of people it's faced with is just completely beyond anything that's realistic for them. And the picture that you see in this slide, it was taken in on my first mission with MSF in 2005. This was in northern Uganda. 50,000 people living on this camp, and this is one of 6 camps in this area. The Ugandan government decided to move people out of small towns and villages into these camps and then garrison the Ugandan army around them to theoretically protect them. But the problem with that was that the medical services were instantly overwhelmed, and these people were suffering in camps where there was no facilities for them. So what MSF did is we went in there. We provided not only medical care, our water and sanitation experts became involved with the response, and they helped the community to develop safe pit latrines. The community was digging those under MSF supervision. And the water and sanitation people as well got involved in the delivery of boreholes and the drilling of those, so providing safe water for the communities. The opposite of overwhelming demand is where people live so far away from medical facilities, or the medical facilities can't come to them, that it's impossible to access. So this is another form of exclusion. And the pictures you see here, where the one on the left was taken again in South Sudan in 2008, and this is us trying to access a community where we'd heard reports of a measles outbreak, and that what looks like a path is indeed a path, but that was the only access to the villages that we were trying to explode. The picture on the right is myself and Henry, our driver in South Sudan that I was working with. We look like we're walking through a river. This is actually the road to either Gangura or Sakure, again in South Sudan. So getting access to communities was extremely difficult at times. I'm very proud to say that we got there on this day, and I know that because we got to the facilities every day that we tried to. The next context will be the focus for today's talk, and that is our responses to epidemics. So I'll be coming back to this with a particular focus on the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. And so The final context would be, excuse me, natural disasters, and MSF has an enormous role in South Sudan, as I've already mentioned a couple of times, and we are currently dealing with swathes of flooding in that country, and other natural disasters that MSF becomes involved in, things like earthquake responses or post-hurricane response. These are anything that you see on the news that has a wide-reaching impact. MSF will be there. What I'd like to do now is talk about my mission in South Sudan in 2013. I was 6 months in a place called Leer in the north of the country. I was running the nutrition centre there. This is one of our patients. This is Mariek. He came to us in July of 13. As you can see, he's in an extremely emaciated state with severe malnutrition, but he's also got, and this was our priority, extreme dehydration. So our initial priority with him, before even addressing his nutritional status, was to reverse this dehydration, which could have led to organ failure and be indeed life-threatening. What I would ask you, if you can, depending on the screen you're looking on, is to look at his left arm and see how loose the skin is on his arm. Just remember that for the slides that are coming up. If you look at this young boy's face, he's got this, it's called an old man face, which is a 53-year-old man I'm starting to resent, but he's got this, the sunken eyes and the loose skin around his face. This is a combination of things going on there. There's both, as I say, dehydration and malnutrition. As we move forward a couple of weeks and Mariek's into our nutrition program, we've reversed the effects of the dehydration. But as you can see, look at that left arm, the skin is still very loose on there and under his armpit on the left side. The sunkenness around his eyes, all the creases in his face have gone. That's the reversal of the dehydration. Now we're focusing on the malnutrition. And that focus continued up to 4 weeks, where he's making significant progress. And the most amazing slide I probably own is him at 6 weeks, about to be discharged. And to just look at him makes me swell with pride. It's the greatest thing I've seen really in my career. So yeah, this is Mariek. The next patient is Joak. And Joak came to us with this horrendous injury to his right hand. This is a snake bite. It's a close-up of this horrible injury. And there's no value in shocking. I'm not showing these for shock value. There isn't anything to be gained from that. What I'm demonstrating on this is that this young man's injury, that was so horrific by the time he got to us, could have been so different if he'd had access to medical facilities sooner. And this is what I talked about when I mentioned exclusion from care and remote areas. This is the impact of exclusion from care. There was no choice with Joak but to amputate his hand. And so, sorry, I'm just having a slight technical problem. So he went to the operating theatre. The hand was amputated. But look at him. Look at the spirit of this young man. Absolutely remarkable. This is his dominant hand as well. So for him to be able to smile and move on, and this is him with his sister. Those are my glasses. He wanted to try them on, but a remarkable young man who got back to some semblance of normality, playing games with people. Just an incredible spirit. So that's how I normally want to talk about the people who I work for in my job, and that's not the organisation, it's the patients. These are the people I primarily work for. In Ebola, it was very difficult to work for the patients, and it would be also very difficult to talk about those patients in these personal terms, and you'll see why shortly. So in November of 2014, I left the UK, trained for a number of days in Amsterdam intensively on how to work in this environment, and then left Europe and into Sierra Leone to head across the country to a place called Kailahun, about 200 miles from the capital of Freetown over in the west. So Kylehoon is in this really quite remote enclave of the east of the country. It takes about 8 hours to get across there because the roads are very poor, and that's where our Ebola Management Centre was located. The people of the area had become used to MSF being there. We'd been there about 6 months, and they were highly accepting of us being there, even though frightened of the disease, obviously. Numbers play a really important role in our lives, and the number 47 always, whenever I see it in my days, I always think about my time in Ebola. This is the number of people that died in the 1 month that I was working there. It just shows what the mortality rate of this horrendous disease is like. When those people died, they were taken to this graveyard. This is the hastily established jungle clearance that we used as a graveyard. Many people's bodies were buried there, and it's tragic to think that these markers were all at the wash for them. You'll be familiar, no doubt, with this appearance of people in these yellow suits with all this protective gear on. Very difficult to work in full PPE. A term everyone talks about PPE now in COVID, but yeah, it's all protective equipment that we were familiar with back then. Very difficult environment to work in for what had to be limited time. We could only work for 60 minutes in these suits, and the simple reason for that is that the temperatures inside them were just outrageous, really. 46 centigrade measured by the Canadian Medical Association, I believe it was, inside the suits. Unsustainable for longer than 60 minutes, and you had to be very efficient when working in them for that 60 minutes. So that meant you had to plan very carefully what we were doing. And on this picture on the left there, you see this is actually me briefing the team before we go into the high risk area to look after the patients. So we're saying what we're going to do, who we're going to go and see, what we're going to do when we get there, and make sure we see the most needy patients and then get out again. Not just medical work taking place, it never is. On the right, you see the logistics people working to keep the fabric of the building intact. Not only logistics, so you've got logistics, you've got nursing, you've got medical, administration, water and sanitation. There is a huge array of people that work with Doctors Without Borders in the field. Primarily, the people that run the missions are the national staff. The national staff, the locally recruited people who are trained in specific jobs and come in and work there continuously. These guys were working there for 6 months prior to my even arriving in the country. And people talk about Doctors Without Borders and sometimes use the word hero. I'm not a hero, and I think you'll find that most of my colleagues will say the same thing. If there are heroes in MSF, then it's the national staff. Ambulances arrive from all over the country, sadly. There was a number of political failings that led to people having to travel across the country instead of going to much closer Ebola management centres, because there simply wasn't enough of them because of misdirected financial investment. The NGOs, the non-governmental organisations like MSF, like Save the Children, did what they could to build as many Ebola management centres as possible. But yeah, they needed more investment and the right things being built at governmental levels. That's exactly what happened to this little girl. She came all the way across the country from just outside Freetown, a little girl called Fatima, who actually travelled with her granddad. And they came all the way to Kylehoon, about 8 hours in an ambulance. I opened the back doors of those ambulances twice to find live people mixed in with dead people, people that died in transit to the management centres. So imagine this little girl in that environment. So she came to us, and she initially made a reasonable response. She was in a very poor state when she arrived, but initially made a good response. We managed to get some rehydration fluids into her via intravenous line that I managed to place in her foot. We gave these fluids, and again, as you saw with Maria, Kalia managed to improve her situation. But the disease process obviously went on, and she started to deteriorate. And over the next few days, despite everything we did, she continued to deteriorate and then eventually died. And this is why I'm here today, and this is why I do all my presentations. because Fatimata, she is the talisman, if you like, for our experience in Sierra Leone and for this whole outbreak and the tragedy of it. And her story deserves to be told. She mattered, she was loved, and if it isn't told, it's like she never existed, and she did. This is Ishmael. Ishmael, he has a much nicer story. He was discharged and was willing, as all the people that you've seen here, either the parents or the people themselves, have given permission for me to tell their stories. Ishmael recovered from Ebola and agreed to me taking his pictures. In fact, he was so pleased when I said I wanted to take his pictures and tell the world about him. This is him at his discharge. He's got into some new clothes. He's had a shower, dressed into new clothes, and he stepped at this through the fence and is about to leave the management centre, having recovered from Ebola. I'd taken his blood samples in the morning, and it's a very dangerous time taking blood from these patients there. If you get what's called a needle stick or an inoculation injury, then you're basically going to get Ebola. The viral load of direct blood to blood transfer is so high that you're gonna get the disease. So we have to make the environment really safe, get the sharps box right where you know it's going to be, get all the kids away, the radio's turned off, only the patient, and then talk to the patient. These people have never had blood samples taken before they came to the Ebola Centre. It's completely alien to us. I give presentations all the time, and I often say to people in a room of 30 people, raise your hand if you've never had a blood sample taken. And we're talking about groups like the WI, older people. There's nobody that hasn't had a sample taken at one time. That's different in this context. Medical access is very tricky for people. So anyway, Ishmael had his blood samples taken, and then we gave him a certificate, which sounds kind of bizarre. Why do you give somebody a certificate to say they've recovered from something? You give that because these people are going to have to return to communities that are full of fear. They're worried that these patients who've come back from Ebola are infectious and are going to cause problems to them and put them at risk. So we not only gave them a certificate that looked very official, because it was from us with stamps and government stamps on it, but also we would take them back to the village and talk to the people of their community just to reassure them. So that was Ishmael discharged, and that was just about my end in Kailahun. I flew down to Freetown and then back to the UK in mid-December. There's a lot more to my story, and if you're interested, by all means have a look at my website on andy4msf.com, and it would be nice to connect with you on social media, so feel free. I'll leave the final slide, which is normally a video, but I'll just give the picture here, just to say a big thank you from me, and thank you for the people that I work for, and that's the patients. Thank you.